In 1930, two gentlemen, loosely associated with Oxford, wrote a history of England. Sort of. It was part parody, part satire, and part pure nonsense, with a lot of wordplay thrown in for fun. The authors are credited as Walter Carruthers Suller, Agrat, Oxon, and Robert Julian Yeatman, failed M.A., etc., Oxon. The failed M.A., etc. is kind of self-explanatory, but the Agrat takes some explaining. Basically, it's an archaic term for, quote, a certificate indicating that a student is ill, excusing attendance at lectures and examinations, and allowing courses to be passed without finishing the work, unquote, as well as, quote, an unclassified degree awarded to such a student, unquote. That should be all that's necessary to vouch for the authors. This is, of course, the famous 1066 and all that, described by its authors as, quote, a memorable history of England, comprising all the parts you can remember, including 103 good things, 5 bad kings, and 2 genuine dates, unquote. The book begins with a compulsory preface, which reads, in part, "This means you." Histories have previously been written with the object of exalting their authors. The object of this history is to console the reader. No other history does this. History is not what you thought. It is what you can remember. All other history defeats itself. This is the only memorable history of England, because all the history that you can remember is in the book. For instance, 2 out of the 4 dates originally included were eliminated at the last moment. Research done at the Eton-Harrow match having revealed that they were not memorable. History is now at an end. See Chapter 62. This history is therefore final. Chapter 1. Caesar invades Britain. The first date in English history is 55 BCE, in which year Julius Caesar, the memorable Roman emperor, landed.
The first sentence, the first error. Julius Caesar was never an emperor. He was a general, a consul, and a dictator, which had a bit of a different meaning than it does today. But emperor? No.
Julius Caesar, like all other successful invaders of these islands, landed at Thanet.
Thanet. The Isle of Thanet is a peninsula forming the easternmost part of Kent. While in the past it was separated from the mainland by the 2,000-foot-wide Wantsum Channel, it is no longer an island. And yes, it seems a number of future invaders landed at Thanet, it being the easternmost point of England, closest to the continent. More detail at the proper time. The Wantsum Channel was a strait separating the Isle of Thanet from the northeastern extremity of the English county of Kent and connecting the English Channel and the Thames estuary. It was a major shipping route when Britain was part of the Roman Empire, and continued in use until it was closed by silting in the late Middle Ages. Its course is now represented by the River Stour and the River Wantsum, which is little more than a drainage ditch lying between Reculver and St. Nicholas at Wade and joins the Stour about 1.7 miles southeast of Sar, shown as a red dotted line on the map.
This was in the olden days, when the Romans were top nation on account of their classical education, etc. Julius Caesar advanced very energetically, throwing his cavalry several thousand paces over the river Flumen.
River Flumen. Flumen is a Latin word for river, so this would be the river. Yeah, this river never existed. But England does have a river elsewhere. It famously flows through the town of Stratford. In an ancient Brittonic language, Avon meant river. There is, however, a Flumen River in Spain.
But the ancient Britons, though all well over military age, painted themselves true blue, or woad.
Woad. A most misunderstood substance and concept, based largely on a mistranslation, or at least a misinterpretation, of Caesar's writings. True woad is a blue dye obtained from the Isatis tinctoria plant, and is really nasty stuff to put on your skin. I don't have the time or inclination to go into detail, but if you really want the skinny on woad and its uses, try these links. The links can also be found in the description below.
And fought as heroically under their dashing queen, Wodicea.
Wodicea is merely a play on Boadicea, as she used to be called. Now she's known as Boudica.
As they did later in Thin Red Lines under their good queen, Victoria.
The thin red lines under Queen Victoria refer to the British colonial army in their flashy red uniforms. You know, the redcoats are coming.
Julius Caesar was therefore compelled to invade Britain again the following year. It's 54 BC, not 56, owing to the peculiar Roman method of counting.
Just a joke. How can you tell how long it will be till something when you don't even know what that something is? But if you really want to know, Romans counted years from 753 BCE, the traditional date of the founding of the city. Therefore, they would have considered 54 BCE to be year 699 AUC. Apologies in advance for my poor Latin pronunciations. AUC stands for either ab urbe conditi or anno urbis conditi, depending on who you talk to, but both meaning roughly from the founding of the city.
And having defeated the ancient Britons by unfair means, such as battering rams, tortoises, hippocausts, centipedes, axes, and bundles.
Mostly nonsense. I can see battering rams, but tortoises and centipedes? Bundles of what? And the ancient Britons had their own axes. Hippocaust is an archaic spelling of hypocaust, the Roman underfloor heating system.
You know, those unfair means, set the memorable Latin sentence, Veni Vidi Vici, which the Romans, who were all very well educated, construed correctly. The Britons, however, who of course still use the old pronunciation, understanding him to have called them weenie, weedy, and weaky, lost heart and gave up the struggle.
This joke works better in print than vocally. Latin didn't have a V sound. what looks to us like a V was pronounced like a W. Therefore, weni, weedy, weechi. Quite similar to the joke here. There's also the joke, veni, vidi, visa, I came, I saw, I shopped, which has no relevance here.
Thinking that he had already divided them all into 3 parts.
Divided into 3 parts. A reference to Caesar's famous book, The Gallic Wars, which begins, Gallia est omnis divisa in partes tres, meaning all Gaul is divided into 3 parts.
Culture among the ancient Britons. Now, the ancient Britons were by no means savages before the conquest, and had already made great strides in civilization. For example, they buried each other in long round wheelbarrows. That's agriculture.
The burial mounds are called barrows, nothing to do with wheels or agriculture.
And burnt each other alive, religion, under the guidance of even older Britons called Druids or Eistefads, and worshipped the mistletoe in the famous Druidical churchyard at Stoke-Penge.
Woof, what a load of malarkey. I'll try to unpick this best I can. First, the Eisteddfod, which is a Welsh festival centering around poetry and music, was originally a competition between bards and minstrels and such, eventually becoming more of a party, sort of a cross between a poetry slam and Woodstock. Mistletoe wasn't exactly worshipped, but it was important in Druid rituals. The whole sacrificial burning alive business is hotly, pun intended, debated among historians and anthropologists. The only evidence of such activities comes from the writings of the Romans, who were dedicated to wiping out the Druids and wouldn't have passed up an opportunity to defame them. Believe what you will. Stoke-Penge is a multi-level joke. Obviously, it's an intentional mangling of Stonehenge, made up by combining the names of 2 small towns, Stoke-Poges near Windsor and Penge near Croydon.
The Roman conquest was, however, a good thing, since the Britons were only natives at the time. The Roman occupation. For some reason, the Romans neglected to overrun the country with fire and sword, a phrase used throughout the book to describe any invasion, though they had both of these. In fact, after the conquest, they did not mingle with the Britons at all, but lived a semi-detached life in villas.
Semi-detached is the British term for what Americans would call a side-by-side duplex. It has nothing to do with villas or a kind of lifestyle.
They occupied their time for 200 or 300 years by building Roman roads and having Roman baths. This was called the Roman occupation, and gave rise to the memorable Roman law, "He who baths first baths fast," which was a good thing, and still is.
Which we remember as "he who laughs last laughs best."
The Roman roads ran absolutely straight in all directions and all led to Rome. The Romans also built towns wherever they wanted, and in addition, a wall between England and Scotland to keep out the savage Picts and Scots. This wall was the work of the memorable Roman Emperor Balbus, and was thus called Hadrian's Wall.
The Romans built a wall to keep out the northern barbarians, yes, but Picts and Scots, as unified peoples, didn't show up until the early Middle Ages. It was called Hadrian's Wall because it was built by Hadrian. There was no such person as Emperor Balbus. Sulla and Yeatman may have been playing games with the names of two later emperors, Galba, who wouldn't be born for another 50 years, and Balbinus, or Balbinus, who was 300 years in the future. Or they were just joking that it had one name while being built by somebody else. And one more thing. Hadrian's Wall is not the current border between England and Scotland. The border is diagonal, so the wall varies from 10 to 50 miles south of it, roughly.
The Picts, or painted men, were so called to distinguish them from the Britons. Saxons and Jutes, who, landing at Thanet, soon overran the country with fire. Oh, and of course, the sword. See, I told you. And that's only chapter 1. There's 61 to go. Goodness knows how long that's going to take. Cue the cats.